Thank you for joining me for the officials training for RMAL Strokes and Turns for the 2021 season. First off, let me thank everyone for attending this training virtually and for the participation as a Strokes and Turns official or a starter or a ref for the summer season this year. In this video, we'll cover the following areas: the philosophy of officiating swimming, typical jurisdictions we see for in RMAL for summer league normal season meets, as well as we'll go over the DQ slips. Then we'll talk about how to officiate breaststroke, how we officiate butterfly, then backstroke freestyle, as well as the individual medley and the relays. In terms of a philosophy of officiating swimming, there are 5 things I'd like everyone to take away from this video lesson. First off is, and most importantly, is that the swimmer always gets the benefit of the doubt. It's okay to raise our hand if we see something as a strokes and turns official in order to talk it over with the referee. But if there's any doubt as to what we saw or what lane we saw it in, or any doubt at all, we want to make sure we give the swimmer the benefit of the doubt. It's better to let an infraction pass by without being written up than it is to incorrectly take the swimmer from a swimmer. So remember, the swimmer always gets the benefit of the doubt. Secondly, it's important that we call what we see, and we see what we call. It's not, and what this really means is that we don't want to call what we think we saw or what could have happened. We want to have positive confirmation as to what we saw, the infraction. We want to make sure we actually see the infraction, as opposed to seeing some evidence that the infraction may have happened. So it's important we have positive confirmation that we're seeing a swimmer. If it's a one-hand touch, we see a one-hand touch, which means we see the other hand not touch. This is very important that we call what we see and we make sure we see what we call. Thirdly, if there is an infraction, we have to raise our hands. As officials, we have to raise our hands and alert the coaches and other people around the pool that there is an infraction. If we do not raise the hand, there is no call. And that's really the first question the ref should be asking strokes and turns: did you raise your hand? If the ref did not see the hand go up. Again, number 4, if there's a doubt about a call or which swimmer made the infraction, let the referee know. Again, if there's any doubt as to which swimmer or about the call, we rather not have a DQ than to DQ the wrong swimmer or DQ a swimmer for the wrong reason. And finally, we want to observe swimmers in our jurisdictions rather than inspecting swimmers. What this means is that we're looking, and we'll go over this next slide, but we're looking at a series of lanes, let's say a quadrant of the pool in RMAL. We want to be observing that quadrant, that jurisdiction, and as we see things, we can raise our hands. If we see infractions, we can raise our hands. We never want to find ourselves focusing solely on a specific swimmer for a long period of time, trying to understand if there's something wrong with the stroke. Again, we want to observe, not inspect. And if we find ourselves looking too closely at a kick or a stroke or something the swimmer's doing, it's probably best to go ahead and look away. In this case, it means that we're probably having to think too hard about it. So again, observe the swimmers in the jurisdiction, do not inspect the swimmers. A lot of pools in RMAL, they have diving. They may have a diving well. They may have some entry areas coming in. They may be L-shaped or Z-shaped. But basically, for swimming purposes, we're looking at either 6 or 8 lanes. There's probably 1 or 2 5-lane pools due to the depth of the pool. But basically, the way we set jurisdictions is we basically do it in quadrants. So there's usually a typical 4 strokes and turns. Each one has their zone, which is half the pool in terms of lanes and half the pool in terms of distance. So for example, strokes and turns number 1 would have lanes 1, 2, and 3 in this example, and they will be observing swimmers in the lanes out to about halfway, right? And then the strokes and turns in zone 3 would be observing those same lanes on the other side of the pool halfway. We never make calls outside of our jurisdiction. We only make calls within our jurisdiction. And this diagram here is showing the typical placement of a strokes and turns official. So on the turn end of the pool, we want to be, dead center of, lanes 4, 5, and 6 in this example, or 1, 2, and 3. So we have strokes and turns on the turn in the middle of lane 2, in the middle of lane 5. And on the other end, the same thing, except we do have to worry about the blocks are in the way of standing directly over the lane, so we cheat slightly to the side. And it's preferable to cheat towards, to be between lanes 4 and 5 and 2 and 3. There'll also be a starter with the starting unit that will be stationary, or he may be moving if we start 25s from the turn into the pool, and the referee will generally be walking around, observing the officials, answering questions, and adjudicating calls, as well as talking with the coaches and the computer and the starter. Again, during any meet we have, the referee is responsible for setting the deck so that it is balanced. Referees are trained in how to do that, and they will also determine whether there's rotation, whether strokes and turns officials rotate to different positions after every stroke, after every 5 events, however the referee wants to balance the pool. The DQ slip was just a word of caution is that we may have multiple versions. Over the past 2 years, we didn't use them last year because we were virtual in 2020. So there might be some older versions left over from 2018 or 2019. But basically, there's not much difference between the most recent versions of the DQ slip. At the top of the DQ slip, the most important thing that we have to fill out as strokes and turns officials is the very top, and the 3 things that we must get right and we must fill out is the event number, the heat, and the lane. We must fill these out before signing at the very bottom as a judge. If we have time, we know the swimmer and the team, if the heat sheet is very stable, if there are no changes going on, they're on collapsing heats, then feel free to put the swimmer and the team in. This can also be left for the computer person or someone at the table, but it must be filled in before going to the coach of the team. And again, at the very bottom, the judge will print their name for strokes and turns where it says judge, and the referee will print their name where it says referee, and then the referee should make sure that the coaches are notified in a timely manner about any DQs. It is best for the referees to be doing this during the meet and not handing coach a bunch of DQ slips after the meet's over. Because of copyright issues, I will be listing in the description of this video on YouTube. I'll have links to the different strokes that we should be looking at, and I'll be referring everyone to those videos, but I will not be showing those videos in this training lesson. When you start thinking about strokes, it's good to sort of break them down into the individual components of a stroke in an event. I like to think of all the strokes in the following pieces. There's a start, there's a stroke of the arms, the kick, the turn, and the finish. So at this time, I ask everyone to please pause this video and watch the How to Officiate Breaststroke video. This is a USA Swimming video that's produced by USA Swimming, and the link is in the description. to view this on YouTube. After having seen that video, let's break down breaststroke. The start, it's a forward start, which means the swimmer is going to be starting either on the blocks, beside the blocks, or in the water with one hand on the wall, and that swimmer will be facing the pool. The starting position is the responsibility of the starters. For strokes and turns, we don't have to worry about this, but just know that that is his forward start. For the stroke, the body must be kept on the breast. That's why it's called breaststroke. And breaststroke is also, it's a cycle stroke, which means that it is defined, the cycle is defined as one arm stroke followed by one leg kick in that order. The arms must move simultaneous for both the pull and the recovery. They must be not only simultaneous but in the same horizontal plane. Horizontal plane is defined. The horizontal plane is defined as the surface of the water. So all arm movements must be simultaneous in the same horizontal plane to the surface of the water, and there can be no alternate movements of the arms. The hands are brought back, as you saw in the video, on or under the surface of the water. And the hands shall not be brought back past the hip line except for the first arm pull after the start and each turn. Hands must be recovered from the breast. And elbows must remain underwater except for the last stroke prior to the turn or the finish. And the head must break the surface during each cycle. The swimmer doesn't have to breathe each cycle, but some part of the head must break the surface during each cycle. And finally, after the start and after each turn, the head must break the surface of the water before the hands turn inward at the widest part of the second stroke. And the video did a good job of demonstrating what this means. Before we move to the kick, I think generally what we see in RMAL a lot, especially with the younger kids on the stroke, is we will often see the younger kids, their hands will they will pull those hands past the hip line after the first pull. They will do it consistently up, if it's 25, they'll do it the whole way, or they'll do it multiple times. Again, we really want to see the hands break the hip line, and not just a pull that goes deep, where the hands are going deep and they're still recovering from the best. It's just they're recovering deeper in the water as opposed to tighter to the body. So we really want to make sure that we're in position to see those hands go past the hip line. On the kick, after the start of each turn, one butterfly kick is permitted at any time prior to the first breaststroke kick. In the video, based on the dating of that from 2015, they had recently changed the rule where there was a rule change that had said that previous rule was that the butterfly kick was allowed once there was arm separation for that first pull. That requirement is no longer there, and so butterfly kick is now permitted at any time prior to the first breaststroke kick. Does not have to be. It's no longer tied to the first arm pull. Again, the kick must be simultaneous. Legs must move simultaneously in the same horizontal plane with no alternating movements. Definition of a breaststroke kick is that during the propulsive phase of the kick, the feet are turned outwards. So the swimmer is getting propulsion off the bottom of the feet as they're squeezing that water together. And there's no scissors or alternating kick and no butterfly kicks except for that first kick off the start and each turn. The turn is defined as a touch it must be two hands, simultaneous and separated. The hands, they do not have to touch. They don't have to touch in the same horizontal plane, but they have to touch at the same time. So it's two hands simultaneous and separated, which basically means that which simultaneous separated means that the palm is one palm is not over top of the other palm, right? We want to see separation of the palms, right? So if there's any, if as long it is considered separated, if the touch is not stacked, where one hand is stacked direct, one palm is stacked directly on top of the other palm. So again, two hands simultaneous and separated. Once a touch has been made, the swimmer may turn in any manner. What you might see, even in breaststroke, younger swimmers, they might touch. Still might have a completely legal touch. Still have touch with two hands simultaneous and separated, and then they'll, for some reason, they'll do a flip turn, or they'll hang on the wall. They'll wave to mom and dad, wait for the cameras, whatever. But the swimmer, once the touch has been made, once a legal touch has been made, the swimmer may turn in any manner the swimmer decides to turn, and then that turn is completed once the feet leave the wall. So once the feet leave the wall, the swimmer must be back on the breast. But between the two illegal two-hand touch and the feet leaving the wall on the breast, the swimmer may do whatever they want to on the wall. And the finish is, the swimmer must finish on the breast, and we're looking for two hands simultaneous and separated. The DQ slip for breaststroke, this has the most options here for disqualifications because it is the most complex of the strokes we see. And we just a little illustration here, put some definition around some of these terms. For the start, I would look at this as basically from the entry off when they dive off the blocks, enter the water, until they surface, and then during the swim is any time they're not starting, turning, or finishing, which is from the time they surface to the last stroke prior to the turn. The turn would be defined as the last stroke in, what they're doing on the wall, with the touch and leaving the wall, to heads up, and then the finish is the last stroke into the finish. Again, we talked about, not in arms not in the same horizontal plane. Again, this sometimes what you'll see is a swimmer will come off the wall. Their breast, they may be on the breast, but they're at a 45-degree angle, and they're starting the pool. In breaststroke, because all strokes must be in the same horizontal plane, they're not allowed to start the pool until their body is horizontal in the water. Again, the no touch. So again, the touch is defined as a two-hand touch, two-hand simultaneous separated touch. So if the swimmer's coming in and do a flip turn, hit with their feet, they technically have not touched at the completion of that length. So that would be a no touch. That's also too where they were not on the breast. So there are a couple different infractions for that instance. And then head not up during the cycle. Remember, you don't see them breathe. Just at some point during each cycle, the head must break the surface. And again, just to mark up the heat sheet here. Let's say we saw, a 9-year-old swimmer swimming the breaststroke, or let's say an 8-year-old swimmer swimming 25 breast, and we saw them multiple times pulling the hands past the hip line. The way we would mark that is during the swim, arms past hip line. All you have to do is do the 2 checks, and that's all you have to do. You don't have to write any notes on here. Keep the heat sheets as clean as possible, and just make those 2 checks. And that closes it out for the breaststroke. So at this time, I invite everyone to please pause and watch the video on how to officiate butterfly. Again, the link is in the description. Now onto the talking about the stroke. The butterfly starts again. It's a forward start, which means the swimmer will start on the blocks, facing the water. They'll be maybe beside the blocks, or they'll start in the water. Again, the starter has jurisdiction over the start. Strokes and turns, we don't have to worry about that. Again, butterflies also swim on the breast, where the body's on the breast. And just to know what it means to be on the breast, we always look at on the back and on the breast relative to the shoulders. So when we're trying to determine whether the swimmer is on the breast or on the back, we're looking at the shoulders. So if both shoulders are stacked, where one shoulder is directly above the other shoulder, it's almost like the body's 90 degrees. In butterfly, that would be on the breast. The swimmer doesn't leave the breast until they go on the back or towards the back. In backstroke, it would be if the swimmer is 90 degrees, that is still on the back, because they have not passed that 90 degree, that they've not passed the 90 degrees where they're now on the breast. Also, the stroke, there's unlike breaststroke, the swimmer, there's no cycle to butterfly, but the swimmer is allowed one arm pull in the water, and that one arm pull must bring the swimmer to the surface. The swimmer must surface prior to or at the 15-meter mark after the start of each turn. Most of the pools do not have 15-meter marks on the side of the pool. They may have some marks on the lane lines, which is fine. But unless we don't place officials at the 15 to monitor that, if we do have an official that has a jurisdiction of watching the 15-meter mark, then that's fine. We can call 15-meter at the 15-meter mark. Otherwise, if we see a swimmer in butterfly surface, past the backstroke flags at the turn in off the start, or off the backstroke flags with the finish off the turn, then they have gone past 15 meters and we can make the call. Again, the stroke, there's a simultaneous pull under the water and a simultaneous recovery over the water. And when we talk about the recovery over the water, the entire recovery, the arms must break the surface for the entire recovery, which means that, and we define the arms from the wrist to the shoulder. So for the entire recovery, the arms must be over the water simultaneous. And we must see the arms breaking the surface for the entire recovery from the wrist to the shoulder. We want to see some part of the arm, the entire part of the arm breaking the surface for the entire recovery. In terms of judging whether the recovery is simultaneous, I recommend you look at the hands exiting and entering the water. As long as those are simultaneous, then the recovery is simultaneous. There's no requirements for the arms to be same horizontal plane on the recovery. The kick, all up and down movements must be simultaneous, and what this means is that we don't require the ankles to be like glued together, but what we want to see is we want to see both legs and both legs moving simultaneously. Now, as long as they're not alternating, so you can have one leg higher than the other leg, and as long as they're moving simultaneous, that is fine. If at any time we see the ankles cross, it's not that we think they cross, but if we actually see the ankles cross, then we have an alternating kick. So what can happen is that one leg could be higher going down, and then they come together where they're actually together, and then the other leg might be higher, right? That is okay. It's not alternating until we actually see that there's alternating motion about the ankles. No alternating movements, and then no scissors or breaststroke kick. Just as for definition purposes, a scissors kick is defined as a kick where the propulsion is coming off the top of one foot and on the bottom of the other foot. It's very similar to the old side stroke, where if you've ever learned that stroke or swum that stroke, the propulsion phase of the kick is created because those legs are scissoring together, where you're getting propulsion off the top of one foot and off the bottom of the other foot. And then no breaststroke kicks allowed in butterfly. Moving to the turn, again, The swimmer must be on the breast at the turn and once the feet leave the wall. We're looking for a two-hand simultaneous separated touch. And then once a touch has been made, the swimmer may turn in any manner desired. And for the finish, the swimmer must be on the breast, and we're looking for a two-hand simultaneous separated touch. Going into the DQ slip here, start, swim, turn, and finish are the same. Underwater recovery. Again, this is where once the arms once the pull starts, where you see the wrists are separating. Once that separation happens, where the wrists are separating, we're not so much concerned about hands sculling, but once those wrists and arms start separating, that swimmer is committing to an over-the-water recovery. And what happens a lot is, the pull will initiate, and then those arms just push back either underwater, like they recover from the breast, as opposed to over the water, or sometimes even the swimmer's trying to do an overwater recovery, but maybe doesn't have the strength and the complete arm from the wrist to the shoulder is not able to break the surface for the entire recovery. And the video did a pretty good job of showing an underwater recovery. Resubmergence, let's talk about that. There are two types of resubmergence. One is where the swimmer is resubmerging as part of the stroke, so it's incidental to the stroke. So there may be some time during the butterfly where, if you were to take a picture, there'd probably be a frame or two where the swimmers return completely underwater. This is not what we're talking about with resubmergence. What we're talking about with resubmergence is where the swimmer actually returns underwater and then gains distance via some sort of propulsive motion. So we might see this towards the finish, where the swimmer is coming in, they go underwater, and they actually kick in to the wall. One more thing on butterfly, just to go back to the arms, and because it's not a cycle stroke, there's no requirement to even do one kick or one pull, or you can take many kicks with maybe one pull. You may just not even kick at all and just pull. Again, there's no cycle to butterfly. So a swimmer could easily dive in, keep their hands out front, never pull the hands back, and they could kick the whole way and touch the wall and turn around and do the same thing. So again, just a note on the butterfly comes from breaststroke. And if you want to go look at, there's probably some decent YouTube videos from 1936 Olympics where you see some American breaststrokers swimming the beginnings of the butterfly, where they're recovering their arms over the water. So in many ways, the rules for butterfly and breaststroke are meant to distinguish the two. And I hope maybe that's become evident as you watch the video and we've gone through these stroke instructions. Again, filling up the DQ slip, the same thing as before. We just do simple check marks, and we're done with the DQ slip here. Now moving on to backstroke. So again, please pause this video, and I invite you to watch the how to officiate backstroke from US Swimming, and again, the link, it will be in the description. All right, on to the specifics of backstroke. Backstroke is a very, like the video showed, is a very basic stroke. It's called backstroke because it's swum on the back. The start of the backstroke is an in-water start, where the swimmer is facing the starting end of the pool. I did start the video for this about a minute in, because the first minute was talking about the starting ledges for backstroke, that we do not have those, so that's why I skipped the first minute of the video. But the stroke, the body must be on the back, otherwise there's no stroke associated. We don't care how they move their arms, we don't care what they do with the stroke or the kick, as long as they stay on their back. And the only requirement also with backstroke, is other than being back, is that they must break the surface prior to 15-meter mark, and after the start each turn. The turn, this is where it gets interesting with backstroke. For the turn, as you saw in the video, Some part of the swimmer must touch the wall at the completion of each length. But during the turn, and what that means is that there's no requirement for the hands to touch. For a backstroker, I've seen quite a bit. Sometimes the head will be the first thing it touches. If the head touches the wall, that ends that length, or that ends the length, or the swim. If you do see a swimmer, just thinking about concussion protocols now, how sensitive we are to, and how much we know about concussions and how damaging they are. If you do see a swimmer hit their head, other than a mind tap, just go ahead and circle that on your heat sheet and raise your hand. Let the referee know, so we can inform the coach that the swimmer hit their head, and the coaches all know what to do. If the swimmer hits their head. So again, we try to help them out as best we can by bringing that to their attention. During the turn, again, also you might see swimmers who might see their shoulders touch. And also, or they could be, obviously, or a lot of them will touch with their hand. But some part, some part of the swimmer must touch the wall at the completion of each length. During the turn, we do allow what's called the backstroke flip turn, which means that during the turn, the shoulders may turn towards the breasts, after which an immediate continuous single arm pull or an immediate continuous simultaneous double arm pull may be used to initiate the turn. And then upon leaving the wall, the swimmer must be on the back. What we mean by continuous, let's talk about that just for a little bit. Once the swimmer rotates to the breast, and I'm just going to break this down a little more clearly for you. Once the swimmer rotates to the breast, they're allowed to have a single arm pull or a simultaneous double arm pull. Once that the pull can be very, very slow. So if the swimmer is far from the wall and they roll over too soon, as long as that hand is moving, that is no matter how slow it is, it's still a continuous arm pull. Once that arm pull is completed, or that double arm pull is completed, the swimmer has to be making some sort of body movement to initiate the turn. So they may lift the head, they may lift the the hips to initiate the turn. So as long as they're doing something to initiate the turn, it is continuous. Where they're not continuous when we see and I'll show you this on the DQ slip on here, or actually on my heat sheet that I pulled from a meet. But the way I look at it is that if we see a swimmer, they've completed the arm pull, and there's no undulation of the body, they're just gliding into the wall, whether they're kicking or not. At some point, if they're doing a glide, then they are not continuously making that turn, and we have an infraction of the technical rule there. And again, I think the video did a very good job of trying to demonstrate what that continuous motion has to look like. And the finish is, unlike the turn where the swimmer, also one more thing on the turn, if the swimmer, and you saw this in the video as well, if the swimmer rotates towards the breast and starts the arm pull and the wall stops the continuous motion, that is fine. It may look like that the swimmer is rotating towards the breast and touching with a hand on the wall or two hands on the wall. That is fine. But it was continuous up until the time that some part of the swimmer touched the wall. So therefore, on the turn, the swimmer may actually touch on the breast, right? And that is okay. Again, as the videos say, we have to make sure we're watching the whole body during the turn. And again, during the finish, what makes it different is that the swimmer must be on the back when contacting the wall. And just want to show you kind of one of the important things about officiating is taking advantage of the heat sheet. And this is where, me personally, I do, when there is an infraction, I've raised my hand, I will circle the lane, I will write the infraction, and I will put some notes that help to make sure that I saw the infraction properly. And also, too, help me explain it if it's 5 minutes later and I have three other DQs, I will not confuse them. So I make very good use of my heat sheet, making sure that I keep the calls straight and make sure I am not attributing one call. I'm attributing the right call to the right swimmer. So in this case right here, as you'll see, the swimmer in this, and I've removed the names and the teams. But there was a DQ in the swimmer in lane 2. The infraction was delay initiating turns. In other words, the arm they rolled over to the breast. They took an arm pull. Both hands were by the side. There was no undulation, no body undulation, and they were about 2 or 3 feet out from the wall, and the body was doing nothing to indicate that they were turning. So I kind of drew a little picture here so that if I had to give more explanation around my call, I've captured a quick visual. And this takes me, after many years of doing this, this takes me just a matter of 15, 20 seconds to do this. But again, if there's a question about what lane, if I feel the DQ slip out improperly, then as long as the heat sheet indicates the right lane, the infraction, then we're good to go. So again, I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that we're using our heat sheets when we see infractions. And then this is where the notes go, as opposed to on the slip where it's just 2 checks, right? And this is what that DQ slip would have looked at. So at the turn, I check turn and I check delay initiate turn, and I'm done there. Again, let's see here. You can read some of the explanations here, but the multiple strokes. This is where you'll see this sometimes, especially with younger swimmers, where they will rotate to the breast. They take their first pull, the arm pull. They're still too far away, and so they take another arm pull, right? So once they have rotated towards the breast, they're only allowed one arm pull or a simultaneous double arm pull. They cannot take more than one stroke, right? Once they've rotated towards the breast. And again, sometimes you'll see swimmers, they'll come off the wall and they'll be, they'll forget to swim in backstroke and they'll be towards the breast. So, but again, we see as we move through the strokes here that the number of things that the swimmer can disqualify for is becoming less and less. All right, on the freestyle. So again, I invite everyone to pause and watch this video on YouTube on how to officiate freestyle. And again, the link is in the description. Okay, highlights on freestyle. It's a forward start. There's no stroke associated with freestyle. So in a freestyle event, the swimmer can do whatever they want to do. They must break the surface prior to the 15 meter, prior to at the 15 meter mark at the start of each turn. There are no rules associated with the kick. At the turn, some part of the swimmer must touch the wall, and at the finish, some part of the swimmer must touch the wall after the prescribed distance. The key thing here on, let's say that it's a 50 freestyle, the swimmer comes in for the turn, does the flip turn, misses the wall, and when we talk about missing the wall, we really need to see the swimmer not touch at a certain turn. And when we see that, at that time we raise our hand, but as you saw, as you saw in the video, the swimmer in backstroke, if they're in backstroke, they can't scull back. If they miss the wall, they can't come back. But in freestyle, they can come back to the wall. So we may see the swimmer miss the wall at the turn. We raise our hand, and if the swimmer comes back and touches it, then there's no disqualification there. Again, the DQ becomes even simpler for freestyle. no touch at turn number. So in a 50, there's only one turn, so we can just check that. If we're swimming, if the older kids are swimming 100 freestyle, then you have turn 1, 2, and 3. So we have to know what turn was missed. And again, the resubmergence is there for freestyle. A couple other things on freestyle, and also too, I'll mention this as well as backstroke too. So in backstroke, they have to stay on the back. So those lane lines for those younger kids, when they go on when they start reaching for that lane line, if they go straight up in the water and they're hanging on the lane line, they're off the back. So that's a DQ. In freestyle, you can hang on the lane line if you want to. You just can't propel yourself with the lane line. Also, too, you can stand on the bottom, but you cannot push off the bottom, and you cannot walk on the bottom. Okay, so, and some of the pools are very shallow. You might see a younger swimmer go there, and they might stand up, fix their goggles. That's fine as long as they float to the surface and start swimming again. They're fine. But if they push off the bottom, that is a disqualification call, or if they're walking on the bottom, that's also a disqualification call. Let's see here. That's it for freestyle. Going to the individual medley, again, I invite everyone to pause this video and then click on the link for how to officiate individual medley, and you can go through the U.S. swimming video on that. All right, highlights from the individual medley video, and also the rules is, again, it's a forward start. So again, we're swimming the IM. In RMAL, we only have the 100 IM, so it's 25. It's a quarter length butterfly, quarter length backstroke, quarter length breaststroke, and a quarter length freestyle in this order. So it's fly, back, breast, and free. And the rules for each stroke are followed for that length. So the first length, we're looking for the butterfly rules. For the second length, we're looking for the backstroke rules. For the third length, the breaststroke rules. And for the fourth length, the freestyle rules. The only difference to the stroke and kick rules is during the freestyle leg, which is the fourth length, the swimmer must be on the breast except when executing a turn. So in other words, they cannot swim on their back. And even for the turn, again, because we don't have any inner stroke turns. All the turns are transitional turns at the 100. So for the transitions from butterfly to backstroke, we're looking for the finishing rules of butterfly, back to breast, the finishing rules from backstroke to finishing rules of backstroke, which means they have to touch on their back. Breaststroke, the finishing rules of breaststroke, and then freestyle. The only thing that's different, again, is when transitioning from the breaststroke to freestyle, the swimmer must be on the breast before any stroke or kick. So if they push off, if they do a two-hand simultaneous separated touch at the end of the breaststroke length, and then they push off, they're on their back, that's fine. It's fine, but they cannot kick or pull until they're on the breast or towards the breast there. Where you'll see this most likely will be probably in the medley relay, where that fourth swimmer is doing a 50 freestyle for the 200 medley relay, and they forget they're swimming the medley relay, and they might be pushing off on their back, doing some dolphin kicks on their back. So that's the only time we really see this rule, and it's on the medley relay. And again, the finish is quite simple. Some part of the swimmer must touch a wall after the prescribed distance. And on the DQ slip here, so the way you fill a DQ slip on this is there's an individual medley section as seen here at the bottom, and then what we do is we just put the strokes and fraction letters. So let's say that the breaststroker had non-simultaneous arms, so we would just put 3F in the stroke and fraction number, and there we go. Now So let's say that the swimmer came off the wall for the freestyle and was kicking on their back. Then that's where you'll see the fourth distance swim and style of previous stroke. That's where we would check that box there if we saw that. Real quickly, we will be doing relays this summer. So again, if we're doing medley relays as strokes and turns, there are two things to keep. Well, basically, the only thing to keep in mind is that we're watching the stroke normally. And again, we put the strokes in fraction. So in this case, non-simultaneous arms would be 3F, and then we identify the swimmer. So number 3, which is the breaststroker. So this would be if they're swimming a medley relay. If there is an early takeoff, you might get asked if you're fairly senior strokes and turns. We do like to do dual confirmation on all relays, early relay takeoffs. Especially for the 200 relays. So if you do see an early takeoff, you'll see the box here where it says early takeoff, and then what we'll do there is we'll put the swimmer number. So it's going to be swimmer 2, 3, or 4. And then the way we judge an early takeoff, it's quite simple. Is we look at the feet leave the block, and then once the feet leave the block, we look down for the touch. And looking across 6 lanes, that's generally we have the starter and the referee doing this. But if you're asked to help for this, which is fine, you're senior strokes and turns, just know you're looking for the feet leaving the block. Once the feet leave the block, look down and verify that the swimmer's touched. If the swimmer has not touched, if you look down, the swimmer has not touched, then it's an early takeoff. Otherwise, that's it for the training. I want to thank everyone so much for watching this and following along with the links for the USA Swim videos. Thanks so much. Any questions, please reach out to RMAL. We also have links posted on the website with the PowerPoint for this, as well as some other training aids as well.